and 21. We'll begin with the roll call. We'll start at right.
Kirsten Barnes.
Marla Canfield.
Eric Peterson.
Barry Israel, Vance Garwood.
Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is the minutes from the July 20th Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals agenda. If there are any conversation, now's the time. Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
I, Vance Garwood, make a motion to approve the minutes from the July 20th, 2021 meeting of the Andover Planning Commission.
Thank you, Vance. Have a motion. Is there a second?
Kirsten Barnes, second.
Thank you, Kirsten. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
One abstaining.
And one abstaining. Thank you, Gary. Thank you. Item number 4, communications, the committee and staff report and the potential residential development report and building permit activity. Justin, Lance?
Sure. The committee and staff report in your packet, it contains the minutes of the August 10th Subdivision Committee meeting and the August 3rd Site Plan Review Committee meeting. You'll obviously see a lot of the same agenda items from the Subdivision Committee meeting in those minutes. Just item of note on the August 3rd Site Plan Review Committee meeting, the Site Plan Review Committee approved a site plan for Lot 1, Block 3 of the Heritage. So that's the portion of the project that has the mixed use residential building, commercial, residential, parking garage. So that is that part of the project is moving along. And then 115 West Cloud, their landscape plan was also on the agenda. You may remember they had a special use. That's the auto body shop that was approved by you guys a little while ago. They had a landscape plan that was approved and they came in for a modification on that. They were reducing some shrubbery and the site plan review committee had them add some trees elsewhere. But that's the extent of those two items on the committee and staff report. As far as the potential residential development report, as of now, we have 37 single family building permits issued year to date. And then that number is slightly down a little bit from last year. Last year we had 52. So again, this year we have 37. So a little bit of catch up to do. And on a positive note, the 2020 census numbers came in, and Andover is the fastest growing community in the state of Kansas.
Really?
Yeah. So in 2010, our population was 11,791, and we are currently at 14,892 as of the 2020 census, which is a 26% increase. So pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Justin, thank you. Appreciate that. We will move on to the meat of the evening with agenda item 5.1, the preliminary plat of the Andover Cemetery, 4th edition. Justin, is it yours?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
The subject property is generally located east of North Andover Road between East 21st Street and Southwest 60th Street within the City of Andover Extraterritorial Jurisdiction, or ETJ. The City of Andover maintains platting authority within the ETJ, which is the 3-mile radius located outside of the Andover city limits. The proposed preliminary plat creates one lot of approximately 5.41 acres at the Andover Cemetery for the purpose of cemetery expansion. The subject property receives access from North Andover Road and receives water from the Butler County Rural Water District Number 5. The subdivision committee recommended that the preliminary plat be approved by the Planning Commission at their August 10th meeting. And I'm available for questions, and I believe the applicant is in attendance as well.
Any questions?
We looked at this last Monday night in the subdivision committee, and it seemed pretty straightforward, and we were able to ask any questions of the applicant.
Yeah, I've read that just the two things were that you guys had addressed drainage and it was
Right.
for expansion, and both seem pretty straightforward.
Yes, sir.
With the increase in population, we need to have larger cemetery space too.
Guess that comes with the territory,
I
doesn't it?
guess for the fastest growing population in Kansas.
Hopefully it's not the quickest dying.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's true.
So the applicant's here. Is there any need to have him come up if we don't have any real questions?
Not,
We're good.
not
Okay.
unless you have questions.
Okay. Any further discussion on this one? If not, we'll look for a motion to Approve, approve with modifications, or disapprove?
Mr. Chairperson, Gary Israel, make a motion that we approve the Andover Cemetery 4th Edition preliminary plat.
Thank you, Gary. Have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second by Vance Garwood.
Thank you, Vance. For the second, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next agenda item is item 5.2, the final plat of the final plat of the Meadowbrook 2nd Edition replat. Justin, you again?
This one might be pretty familiar. The subject property is located west of South Andover Road and north of West Harry Street. The Meadowbrook 2nd subdivision is a replat of the Meadowbrook subdivision final plat that was initially reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission back in October of 2019. And the land dedications were accepted by the City Council in July of 2020. So the applicant submitted a replat of the property with the desire to increase the rear yard drainage and utility easement on lots 1 through 9. You may remember the first time you looked at it, it showed that 40-foot easement on those rear lots on the east side there. And the revised submittal went through the process. It was recommended for approval by the Subdivision Committee and approved by the Planning Commission. And just prior to approval by the governing body, the acceptance of the land dedications, the applicant submitted a revised replat depicting a reduced rear yard drainage and utility easement. So nothing on the face of the plat is changing except for that rear yard utility easement. Basically, it's grown and then it's reshrunk. So lots 1 and 2 in this case will continue to have that 40-foot rear yard drainage and utility easement. So basically they kept it on those first 2 lots, and then the rest of it, they moved it back to the 20-foot. We've reviewed the submittal and recommended that the applicant forego the subdivision committee because the subdivision committee had seen it a couple different times. So basically, this is the first time that we've reintroduced it is to you all this evening. As I mentioned, it meets the subdivision regulations, and I'm available for any questions.
So it's basically was reverting 7 of the 9 lots back to what had already been approved.
Exactly.
Okay, that's what I thought when I read it. So,
Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So when we saw it in subdivision a couple months ago, they wanted to move it because to protect the trees in the back. And then now they're going to tear trees out on the 2 and leave it for the other 7. Is that right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that actually works with their removal of trees and what they're keeping. You are correct, Vance. That was their reasoning was for additional tree protection. I think a lot of it also had to do with the actual placement of the utility line in those rear lots. So it was twofold.
So the applicant's still trying to keep as many trees as possible, though.
That's my understanding.
Okay.
The applicant, Mr. Edwards from K.E. Miller, is in attendance, so he might have a better idea of the intent, but that's my intent.
So
Can you come up, please? Yeah. No, thanks. I appreciate it.
Michael Edwards, K. Miller Engineering.
Welcome.
So the original intent when we had moved it 40 foot was to make room to slide over the proposed drainage lines and then get them out of the trees so they didn't have to take out the trees to install those. And those drainage lines only extend up the first 2 lots of the plat. So in seeing the whole line shift, it was reducing building pad area for all those lots up to the north.
Okay.
And the builder wasn't, the developer wasn't comfortable with reducing
Sure.
7 lots when we could only do it with 2 if we needed to. So that was the reason why going and moving just 2 lots over.
Okay.
So the trees will all stay everywhere along the east border.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good explanation. Appreciate that. Any other questions? If not, then we're looking for a motion to approve with modifications, or disapprove.
I, Vance Garwood, make a motion that we approve the Meadowlark 2nd subdivision replat and recommend that the governing body accept the dedication of land for public purposes.
Thank you, Vance. Do we have a second?
I, Gary
do.
Israel, second the motion.
Thanks, Gary. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carried. Agenda item 5.3, the final PUD for the Heritage Second Edition.
The subject property is located east of Douglas Avenue and west of Yorktown Parkway and is part of the Heritage Preliminary Planned Unit Development Plan, which is a single-family residential development fostering active transportation with shorter block lengths and higher residential densities. The Heritage Second Edition final PUD plan is located within the Heritage Preliminary PUD plan. It creates 68 lots on approximately 10.72 acres. Water and sewer service for the subject property will be served by the city of Andover, and the subject properties will receive access from Douglas Avenue and Shea Road. At their August 10th meeting, the subdivision committee reviewed and approved the final PUD plan on the condition that staff work with the applicant to address two outstanding items: the potential temporary public water main, the potential temporary termination of road improvements at Shea Road. It's that little wishbone section towards the bottom of the page there. And a need for a public water main with a 15-foot public easement along Reserve A near Douglas Avenue. That's sort of at the top of the page. So we had those two outstanding items, and after working with the applicant, the first item has been addressed. The Shea Road improvements will continue and intersect with Sunset Drive. And the second item is currently outstanding, but is still being discussed with both Wichita Public Works and Utilities and the applicant. So the applicant, MKC Engineering, who is representing the applicant, they are currently working with them to figure out that utility up north. So those discussions are ongoing. So any approval this evening by the Planning Commission would be contingent upon that one item ongoing and being completed.
Thank you, Justin. Any questions for Justin?
Last week in the subdivision committee, it was Jared, right? Jared with MKEC?
Jason Gish from MKC. Yes.
Jason was there, and he had asked, I think you were having a meeting with him the next morning, and the intersection of Shea and whichever street that was a question about whether that should be finished and just blocked off to keep traffic from going up that street, or whether it wasn't going to be finished. I'm just curious what you guys had decided.
Yeah, so let me see here. So this is the little wishbone area that Vance is referencing. The goal is to obviously complete Shea Road, and I think it was supposed to continue to tie into here. I don't think the plan at the moment is to do those improvements up along Sunset yet. So it was a circulation discussion. And that is basically the point, is to make sure that this area is held off on, just to keep traffic calm in the area. So that's kind of what we landed on, was to continue the Shea Road improvement till about this area here.
Okay. There was a concern about traffic going into the existing neighborhoods and whether that road should be completed and just blocked off with signs, or whether it shouldn't be completed at all until later.
Right. We discussed putting up some diamond signs at over there with the dead end sign, but I think ultimately we're going to probably cut it off, at least temporarily, the improvements until we get further down the line.
Okay.
If we don't have any other discussion on that, then once again, we'll look for approve with modifications, or disapprove.
Well, Mr. Chairperson, I, Gary Israel, make a motion that we approve with modifications the Heritage Second Edition final PUD, and recommend that governing body accept the dedication of land for public purposes based on the fact that the developer needs to continue to work with the city of Wichita on the public water main with a 15-foot public easement along the Reserve A near Douglas Avenue.
Thank you, Gary. Do we have a second?
Kirsten Barnes, second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Mr. Chairperson, I make a motion that we recess the Planning Commission and convene the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Thank you, Gary, and I will second that one. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We will convene the Board of Zoning Appeals at this time with agenda item 5.4, which is a public hearing on case number BZA-CU-2021-03 on the conditional use at 403 West Central Avenue. We would like to welcome everyone interested in this hearing and lay out a few ground rules. It is important that you present any facts or views that you have as evidence at this hearing so that findings can be made for the decision of this board. In order to grant a variance, 5 specific written findings of fact must all be met according to the state statutes and the city zoning regulations. This board is authorized by state statutes to make a decision appealable only to district court and not to the governing body. After our zoning administrator provides us with some information, I will call upon the applicant and then we will hear from other interested parties. Once all have been heard, the applicant will have an opportunity for final comments. The board will close the hearing to further public comments and will then consider their decision, during which time they may direct questions to the applicant, the public, or staff. You should be aware that the board can require such conditions be placed upon the premises and/or the applicant benefited by the conditional use as may be necessary to comply with the standards set forth in subsection 11-107C of the zoning regulations. Such conditions could reduce or minimize any potentially injurious effect of a conditional use upon other property in the neighborhood and to carry out the general purpose and intent of these regulations. Failure to comply with any of the conditions attached to a zoning permit for conditional use shall constitute a violation of the regulations. You should also be fully aware that if the applicant chooses to describe various features of their development plans, the city can only enforce those provisions which are covered in zoning and/or other city codes. Anyone wishing to speak must be recognized by the chairperson and give their name and address. Please use the podium and speak clearly so that your comments can be recorded for inclusion into our minutes. Before we proceed with the hearing, I'll ask the commission members if any of them intend to disqualify themselves from participating in this case because they or a relative own property in the area of notification or have conflicts of interest.
No.
Hearing none, we'll move on to notification. Official notice for this hearing was published in the Butler County Times-Gazette on July 24, 2021, and notices were mailed to the applicant and 11 real property owners of record in the area of notification on July 22, 2021. The record shows that at least 20 days have elapsed between the publication and mailing dates and the hearing date. Unless there is evidence to the contrary from anyone present, I will declare that proper notification has been given. Although we do not encourage such communications, I will ask the board if any of them have received any ex parte verbal or written communications prior to this hearing, which they would like to share.
No.
None.
Hearing none, I now call on the city's zoning administrator to provide us with a report on this case.
The subject property is located at 403 West Central Avenue at the southeast corner of Central Avenue and Leoba Drive. The property is zoned B4, which is a zoning district intended for retail, sales, and service businesses. The applicant desires to offer outdoor patio seating as an accessory use to the tenant space currently occupied by Renew Consign and Cafe. As the use of outdoor patio seating is not permitted by right in the B4 zoning district, the applicant is required to submit a conditional use application and receive approval from the Board of Zoning Appeals, which is why we're here this evening. Per the Unified Development Manual, the board may attach conditions to its approval to ensure that it is compatible with its particular location within the zoning district. Should the applicant desire to make the patio seating permanent, review and approval from the site plan review committee would be required. That's really all I have on this particular item. I'm open to questions.
Justin, can you define permanent? Does permanent mean there all the time, or does permanent mean it can't be moved?
Probably both.
Okay.
So permanent would be, I mean, obviously you can always remove something, but the goal would be to have it there year round, 24/7, generally in operation as part of an accessory to that restaurant.
Thank you.
Good question. Yeah, didn't know if we had anything else for Justin. If the applicant's here, I'll call on them to make a presentation for us, please. If you come to the podium and state your name and address.
We don't know who is the applicant, can't remember. So we're both.
Well, back in November, when this paperwork was signed, I think Taylor was the applicant, looks like, so.
Who?
Taylor?
Taylor, there's Taylor.
All right.
I don't think it matters too much.
My name is Taylor Julius, and my address is 1349 in North Emporia Street, Wichita, Kansas, 67214.
Thank you. Why don't, if you would, kick us off and in your words, share with us the thoughts behind the outdoor seating and your plan and things like that.
All right. So Renee, the seating in her restaurant is very limited. It's all very close quarters. And essentially with social distancing guidelines in place, it was very hard for her to have any seating in a useful amount in her restaurant. So she approached me with this idea to have some temporary outdoor seating while we're getting through COVID.
Forgive me for this, but I've not been in the restaurant. How much seating is inside?
Renee would actually probably know a
Okay.
little better than me. So
Renee West, 648 North Broadview Lane, Andover. Right now, we've had to limit our seating, so I actually had to remove 4 tables that sat more. So I actually have a booth that seats 10 and 1 two-top. So I have and I've actually quit serving food until this all got done and I was able to do something different. Food has actually been in a shortage these days, and
Right.
so I was waiting to make sure that this was going to go through so I could have seating outside, because it wasn't worth it right now to do that. So my seating is really limited.
So I happened to drive by the other day and noticed that there already is outdoor seating. How long?
It's ready to go. No
how-
one's out there doing anything, but it looks pretty.
Okay, how long has that work been done?
Oh, gosh, almost 8 months.
Okay. And it seats how many people?
I've got 4 tops out there.
And does that include distance for social distancing?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's actually barricades too there's like sidewalls between each area too.
So is it basically the 4 that were inside were moved outside and provided
No, I would
space?
still have some inside as well.
Okay.
But I wanted to make sure that people could go outside if they felt comfortable.
As far as the time frame goes, is it your thought that this would last through the fall, or just curious as far as how long this can be approved for and whether this is conditional or?
Yeah, originally we were thinking this August, but how this took longer. We just talked about it sitting here, that maybe if we could do a year and then look at it again in a year and see how it's doing.
I had noticed that your date on the application, at least your signatures, were November 1st last year. And then it looks like the city received it on June 25th. Had it been given to the city before that or just June 25th? I wondered if we were behind or.
I forgot what happened.
I believe the initial, I've never filed for a permit or anything
Sure.
like that. I was relying on her expertise. And there wasn't a whole lot of detail in the initial application. So I
see.
had asked her to kind of fill it out
I see.
so I could see what actually was all going into it first.
Sure. Okay.
And it looks like roughly 4 parking spaces are taken up by the outdoor seating. Is that right?
3, I think. And then we have the handicap stall still available. So three were actually taken up.
Okay.
Any of the neighboring businesses mentioned any?
No, they're excited, actually.
are they?
They're wanting to know if I'm going to do outdoor parties in the evening. They love that it's lit up all night long. And
Sure.
I've gotten a lot of really good comments from it.
Good.
So the thought would be to leave it there through the winter. I mean, I heard you mention
Yes,
maybe
yeah.
a year and then reevaluate as.
Right, right.
Conditional use is, help me understand the length of time and how that works.
Sure. So they can be permanent. They can be for a year or 3 months, or as the applicant said, through COVID. It's sort of at your discretion to allow that length of time. If you'd like, we can do a year and certainly revisit this next August, and it would just be stipulated within the resolution that we will again look at this again in August of 2022. However, I would say that if we are going to be doing that, because some parking spaces have been taken up, you can always put a condition on that and say a parking plan showing how that parking is affected within the greater development, within the greater parking lot, how this addition impacts that parking. So it's something that the conditional use can be approved with the condition that we do get that. And then we can work with the applicant on making sure that there is enough ADA parking available, that there is enough parking in general available for the site. And then if there's any issues with that, or if, staff can't necessarily come to an agreement with that or with the property owner, then we can always revisit it down the line.
So to Kirsten's question from a few minutes ago, at what point do you become permanent and need a site plan? And is it real, whatever I'm trying to say, you know what I'm trying to ask?
Yeah. If we do it a year from now, is that considered a permanent structure? I think that's debatable. I think I would probably call it a permanent structure if it's going to be there for a year. So, as part of the parking plan, we would work with the applicant on what to submit, and it would look like a kind of a standard site plan, and it could have basically the parking layout. But if it's going to be there for a year, and it's something that the applicant likes and wants to continue, I would probably recommend going to the site plan review committee. That would be my professional opinion.
Is it reasonable to think that were the local or the other businesses in the area contacted about this permit?
They did receive notice of the public hearing based on the radius of what was happening tonight. So everybody within that strip center, as well as the surrounding area within 200 feet, did receive a notification.
Is it easily moved if, for example, the parking plan needed it to be shifted north, south, or whatever? Can the setup be moved relatively easy?
Yes, it was designed to break up in 4-foot sections. So yes, it's not necessarily easy to be done, but yes, it can be done fairly quickly, within a day.
Is it reasonable to expect that then if COVID doesn't, continues on the trajectory it's on, that Bob and Luigi's and whoever is the other business in there could come and say, well, we also want outdoor seating, and then all of a sudden we have no parking spaces available?
Right. So that's the reason why we'd be looking at the site as a whole is let's just say if they continue with this and take out 3 parking spaces or whatever, does it still meet the minimum parking requirements? Any future applicant would have to go through the same process as well. And if people are all doing little add-ons and that parking continues to shrink and shrink and shrink, then the site might not meet the minimum requirements or the safety requirements. And that's why we would go through a conditional use process with them as well. So every new applicant would have to go through the same process.
May I say that we have never had a problem with parking? And I mean, we all get along, and I got a text from Roth Christopherson with Bob and Luigi's, and my husband actually has the business next door to my store. And everybody is happy to do it. And Roth does want to do an outdoor seating in the future. And we both feel that it would actually benefit. I think we would still have enough parking because based on how I'm lunch, I'm not dinner, he's dinner.
Oh,
And it works out for both of us the way we work. And usually his lunch is a pickup and he would do a dinner buffet. So it would work out great for both of us.
so would his dinner buffet be able to use your seating area then?
Yes. In fact, I told them anybody's welcome to use my patio.
Okay. So if I went to Bob and Luigi's and bought a
You're welcome
pizza
to use it,
and
yes.
then I could go and sit there and eat.
Yes.
Okay.
And I've
Only for Gary
even
Israel,
the building
Yeah.
too.
just for me.
To the south of us is Dr. Britton and the hair salon. And I've said, please use the space if no one's there, please use it. Have lunch there, whatever you want to do. They don't have to actually use, eat at my cafe to sit there. If it's, I mean, I really want it to be something that the people are Andover can use. It's not just, I don't want it just to sit there and rot. I want it to be used.
Thank you for that.
My thought.
Mr. Chairperson,
Yeah.
if I provide a little bit of context on parking requirements, just like parking requirements is in the city of Andover, as with most cities, are regulated through the zoning regulations just as uses are. Right. So in our zoning regulations, for example, every retail establishment is required to have one parking space per 250 square feet of the building. Another example, restaurants are required to have one parking space for each 2.5 seats that they have within the restaurants, and then an additional one parking space per employee. So those are the type, from a zoning administration perspective, those are the types of things that we're concerned with because we're tasked with enforcing those zoning regulations. So when you take up 3 parking spaces at a minimum, we generally want to know how many parking spaces are still remaining. Are you still meeting that minimum requirement? And if you're not, then there's a process to vary that, if you will, to have a variance, or there's some exemption or exception language in there for the zoning administrator. We don't know those calculations as of the time of this application. And to give you a little bit more context on that, we began these conversations with the property owner a year or so ago when we were right in the throes of that initial pandemic. The city of Wichita did some programs where they were allowing outside seating within the right-of-way. In response to that, the city of Andover didn't have a program for that. So that's where we started having this discussion about temporarily allowing this as a conditional use. So it's been ongoing for quite some time. Now that we have an actual application in, as you guys know, any change to a non-resident, exterior change to a non-residential building in the city of Andover requires site plan review. I think kind of our conversations as staff is that if a conditional use is granted for anything longer than, let's say, a 3 or a 6 month period, that probably is getting into the arena where where site plan review committee should review that change. Having something in place temporarily for 3 or 6 months in response to a pandemic, I think we can work through that between staff and the applicant about location and parking and all of that. Anything more than that, I think it needs probably a more stringent overview of the project. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a background about parking regulations generally, and then why we're having this conversation between temporary and permanent.
Yeah, I've got two questions, Mr. Chairman, Chairperson. So Renee, what are your hours for your business?
Tuesday through Saturday, 11 to 6 at this point.
Okay.
And it will go, when I get back to food, I'm hoping to go 8 to 6,
Okay,
but it'll still be Tuesday through Saturday.
okay. So my question then would be to Lance, when you're doing parking assessments, is it based on the number of hours that the business is open? So if one business is only open in the morning and the other one's open in the evening, I mean, then they only have to have so many spaces during their operating time, right? But if Bob and Luigi's and your husband's business and your business are all open from 8 to 5 or whatever,
Mhm.
then you have to consider all those businesses being maxed out, correct?
That's correct. And that's kind of it's kind of a trend, if you will, or an emerging best practice in zoning is to right size parking regulations. So instead of designing and building and regulating to the maximum, situations to where, for example, the most common is, churches obviously have big parking lots, but they're used of very limited days and times. So sometimes we will allow an adjoining or an adjacent property with some sort of an agreement in writing between two adjacent landowners to share parking and reduce that to number of required parking. So yeah, to answer your question, somewhat succinctly, yes, we take exceptionalities based on the actual land use into account. And that's why there's a little bit of gratitude that the zoning administrator has to take those considerations into consideration.
Okay.
So yes.
So Renee, having heard all that, do you want to do 3 months, 6 months, 12 months?
12 months.
Then that means.
And so based on what he's saying, we've already taken that into account too. Taylor will be in one of the spaces and he needs no guest parking. My husband needs no guest parking, and the whole parking lot's for Bob and Luigi's and myself. So we feel we're pretty safe on parking.
And
So-
to add, just in full disclosure, that if you go to that point to where if the Board of Zoning Appeals feels like it's justified to have the site plan review committee approve that committee, you wouldn't have any reason to be familiar with that committee, but that committee is tasked with enforcing our site plan standards, which are in our Unified Development Manual. Justin can share them with you. But their purpose is to look at the aesthetics of non-residential buildings.
Correct.
So when you go before that committee, they very well might put further requirements on a structure that's going to be there for 12 months as compared to one that's going to be there for 3 months. So it very well, just in full disclosure, they might request changes to that structure to make it more aesthetically compatible with those standards.
On a as a permanent structure or a 12-month structure?
Well, we're classifying again from a staff perspective that we're going to treat a structure that's going to be there for 12 months. We're going to recommend to the board that we treat a structure that's going to be in existence for 12 months as a permanent structure.
Okay, so.
And I think that gets, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think that gets to the core of what Gary was asking. 3 or 6 months is temporary conditional use. Past that is going to get into the arena that Lance was just describing.
He's my landlord, so I have to ask him too. So,
Did I say that fairly?
Yes, you did.
Okay.
thank you.
And if the applicant says, no, we really want 12 months, and we feel like that's beyond a temporary thing, could we go ahead and pass the motion now to give temporary use and they could go through site plan while they're within that 3 month or 6 month time period so that they can go ahead and open? I think, right, I'm assuming that you want to get open as quickly as possible to use it.
Yes, that would be great.
Is that an option?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, you have as much flexibility as you'd like on this. You could always say, yeah, the temporary use says you can stay open until this X amount of time, and you need to submit a site plan review committee application and go through that whole process. So yeah, you can put stipulations on it or word it however you'd like.
So we could grant it as a conditional use, which would
Right.
last for 180 days. But during that time period, essentially they would need to work with the site plan review committee and staff in order to do the parking study or whatever you want to call it. Is that correct? We
Correct.
could do
Yes. Yeah, they could submit an application within that
that?
180-day time
Seems
frame.
reasonable.
And they could find out what site planning might require, and if it's more than you want to do,
That would be great.
then at the end of that period of time, you tear it down and it's done.
We don't want to squash businesses
No.
at all. I mean,
$3,500, I really don't want to.
I think we're all in, we
Yeah.
want you to succeed, and that's not why we're up here and why staff isn't here. We just want to make sure that the city as a whole is taken care of too. Because
Sure,
if Bob and Louis
absolutely.
just were to say, well, we decide we want a separate space, and they take up 4 parking spaces, and then we've got a precedent here already. And so that's kind of where we come from. But again, we don't want
Exactly.
in any way to tell we don't want you to succeed, because I'd love to come get some food and coffee.
Yeah, sounds
Um,
good.
so.
And I encourage you to.
I will.
So
So does that
make homemade pie.
does that idea
Yes,
make
that's
sense?
wonderful.
A conditional use, but during that time,
Yes.
uh,
Yeah, we both like that idea.
make,
Yes.
apply with a site plan.
Absolutely.
Any
Mr.
other
Chairperson,
questions?
you had somebody come in.
I know.
So,
He's in support.
Oh, okay.
And she's in support.
okay.
We thought maybe he was a neighbor that had gotten a mailing. We have to let everybody speak, you know.
Oh,
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Well, you're welcome. Please, do we have any other questions for the applicant? No,
I don't.
thank you. We
Thank you.
appreciate
Thank you very much.
the thorough explanation. Yeah, no, now's the time. If there's any members of the public, please state your name and address and
My name is Stacy Van Tassel. I actually live in rural Benton, 3254 Northwest Butler Road. But while working for Aflac, I met Renee, and a wonderful person, takes care of all of her people. I know she's got a huge designer part in her heart and how her brain works. And so I know she won't be an eyesore to the community as well. Thought I'd just come and support her.
well, it's really nice of you to
Yeah, it is.
come and do that
That's
this
great.
evening. Thank you for
Thank you.
that. Thank you. So I guess to the next item, to the staff, has there been any written communications?
No, sir.
No, we're good. Okay. Thank you guys for the time tonight. I assume you don't have any final comments. We've covered everything. Thank you. So hearing no further public comments, I hereby close the public portion of the hearing. There will be no further public comments unless the board wishes to ask questions to clarify information. The board will now deliberate the request to determine whether the evidence presented supports the conclusions of the required findings of fact. The board will now consider the criteria provided for evaluation. We have 6 of them.
Would you like me to read that, Mr. Chairperson?
Oh, please, if you would, sir.
Okay. Specific conditions to be met. Number 1, the proposed conditional use complies with all applicable zoning regulations, including lot size requirements, bulk regulations, use limitations, and performance standards, or a concurrent application for variance is in process. Staff has commented the proposed patio seating would occupy parking spaces and require analysis of the required parking spaces for the strip center.
Concur.
Would concur. Number 2, the proposed conditional use will not cause substantial injury to the value of other property in the neighborhood. Staff comments that the proposed patio seating facility is well separated from nearby residences, businesses, and public streets. Would
Concur.
Number 3, the proposed conditional use will not dominate the immediate neighborhood, preventing development and use of neighboring property in accordance with applicable zoning district regulations. Staff comments that the proposed location is approximately 150 feet off of Central Avenue and 50 feet off of Lioba Street. The proposed patio seating should not have a substantial effect on traffic or the outward appearance of the building so as to dominate the immediate neighborhood.
Concur.
Number 4, the off-street parking and loading area for the proposed conditional use will be provided in accordance with the standards set forth in Article 6 of the zoning regulations. Staff's comments are the proposed location revises the number of parking spaces available and the general circulation of the west side of the existing parking lot. A revised parking and circulation plan will have to be reviewed.
Concur.
Number 5, adequate utility, drainage, and other such necessary facilities have been installed or will be provided by platting, dedications, or guarantees. Staff's comments that this is not applicable.
Concur.
Number 6, adequate access roads, entrance and exit drives, or access control designed to prevent traffic hazards and to minimize traffic congestions in public streets and roads is available or will be provided by platting, dedications, or guarantees. Staff's comments, the proposed location does not interfere with the existing exit drives.
Concur.
Concur.
Thank you, Gary. Well, we are at the point on this where we either need a motion, but maybe carve out a space in case we need any more clarification from staff on options ahead of us. Otherwise, we're looking for a motion to approve, modify and approve, disapprove, or to table the discussion.
I was going to say, Mr. Chairperson, if I may, any motion, again, you have the ability to add stipulations or however it is that you want to word it. Staff, I think we've heard both 3 months and 180 days, 180 days being 6 months. So just it's the choice is up to you, but whoever makes the motion and says, yep, within that X time frame, I just wanted to go ahead and clarify that we've heard both. So again, the choice is yours, but it's up to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I can go at it. The motion.
Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Mr. Chairperson, I, Vance Garwood, having considered the evidence at the hearing and determined that the findings of fact have been found that support all 6 conditions set out in subsection 11-107-C of the zoning regulations and KSA 12-759E, I move that the chairperson be authorized to sign the resolution granting the conditional use for BZA-CU-2021-03 for up to 180 days, during which time the applicant will work with staff and the site plan review committee to study traffic
And parking.
and parking.
One question of clarification. So just so, and we can reflect it in the minutes in the motion, just to be 100% clear is that we're granting this conditional use for a period not to exceed 180 days. But if the property owner does receive approval of the site plan review committee, that 180-day limitation is thus lifted, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, we would grant it for up to 180 days, and then yeah, it'd be lifted.
Good job, Lance.
I, Gary Israel, would second that motion.
Thank you, Vance and Gary, for the second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Closing remarks. A resolution will be prepared and made available to the applicant as soon as reasonably possible, but no later than October 1st, 2021. If anyone is aggrieved by this decision, a further appeal can be made to the district court to determine its reasonableness within 30 days after the resolution is signed and filed with the zoning administrator. Continued good luck with your business. We wish you the best.
Thanks for coming. What type of pies do you make? Which ones?
Pecan?
Really? Good coffee?
Yes, Starbucks, I'm a contractor, so so I don't have to have a franchise to have service in the store. But anyways, we have.
Glad to know that. I wrote it down somewhere importantly, but you said 11 to 6 Tuesday through Saturday? All right, thanks.
Mr. Chairperson, I'd make a motion to adjourn the Board of Zoning Appeals and reconvene the Planning Commission.
Kirsten Barnes, second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We reconvene the planning commission so that we can wrap up with member items. Anybody have anything for the good of the cause? Hearing none. I, Eric Peterson, will make a motion that we adjourn the Planning Commission and Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Tuesday, August 17th, 2021.
I, Gary Israel, second the motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, guys.
Are we getting new members?